lecturing the kids, and I have to like resort to, don't you know who I am? I'm a behavior analyst. You should be listening to me. And then they just look at me laughing. They're like, Dad, yeah, no.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of the Mentorship Mindset. I'm Brian, and this is Isaac. Today, we are covering quite a bit of ground. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome, something that I think most of us experience. We also have updates on our New Year's resolutions that Isaac and I shared on the first episode of the podcast. And lastly, we interview Eric Davis, who not only is Isaac's guitar teacher, but he also has his own guitar learning program, and he shares with us his experiences of teaching and mentorship.
In the last episode, you were sharing with us about your move. So I'm curious, how'd that go? What's the update?
The update is my wife and I are very happily living in our new house. It's funny because I'm thinking about the prior episode, and per usual, I had all this anxiety and the anticipation of moving really mounting. I'm like, how do I do all of these things? And sure enough, the day for the move comes and it happens. And it's fine.
Right.
We on top of that, we didn't really have any complications from moving. Everything went smoothly. All of our utilities were hooked up, and now we're just super happy to be in our new space. It already feels like our own home.
Nice.
And we actually just got back from a small family trip to Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I were talking on the way, and we said, wow, it's the first time we're coming back from a vacation where we're actually beyond glad to be home because we're back in our routine and away from all of the noise of a vacation, to actually enjoy the space itself in which we're living is huge.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, so we're really happy. We've
Yeah.
settled into our groove in the new place.
Yeah, you're building your nest,
Mhm.
and your comfort zone. Like all of the stress, it seemed like it all worked out.
Yeah. Far and away, the most stress was leading up
Yeah.
to the move. And then once the move happened, it really all just dropped. And then funny enough, on the flip side, talking about, oh, how do I manage all the other stuff? How do I manage work while I'm doing it? Once we were moved into the new house, and I made sure we were largely unpacked quickly because I didn't want that hanging over our head, then it made hopping into work super easy.
Yeah.
And even more enjoyable because it's like, all right, I'm going to work. And then when I come back from work, we're in our home,
you
in
got
our
your
nice
house
new
to go back
place.
to.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So worked
Yeah,
out.
that's awesome. Part of the reason I ask is one of the strategies that I use when I'm going through a period of a lot of stress is to focus on the other side of that stress, because there typically always is the other side, right? Whether it's work related stress, you're going through a season of whether it's a lot of reports or a lot of initiatives or whatever, and it feels stressful. You feel anxious, stressful, a lot of work. But then when I put myself on the other side of that, because there always is another side, things always kind of tend to stabilize, at least for a little bit. I find myself give myself that relief, just really focusing on that side. So for instance, now that you've experienced this, can you see yourself thinking about the other side of things to help manage some of that stress and anxiety that comes with a period of busyness,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, so first, because I guess there's a few ways to interpret the other side of stress. Do you mean
Mhm.
like when you've finally gotten through it and you come through
Yeah,
on the other side?
exactly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's perspective is everything, and I know you've mentioned it quite a bit in our talks here on the podcast and
Yeah.
also behind closed doors, of just the more you actually do whatever that thing is, the more you encounter those difficult, stressful moments, the more you get out of your comfort zone. It feels better. You pick up a little bit more confidence, and just the perspective of being able to say, "Been there, done that."
Right.
Or even if it's not the exact same thing, but if you could draw parallels to say,
Right.
okay, I've been through this stressful
Right.
situation before, so I know it's just a matter of time,
Right.
having to move through
Right.
these changes or this block, whether it's a professional block or an emotional block or something. I'm almost intrigued and a little excited for the next time
Yeah.
something happens, because now I'm going to have more experience to inform me and kind of guide me through
Yeah.
the stressful times.
I think that's a good way of putting it, because you're building the muscles like we all are as we go through life
Mhm.
to be able to handle these higher stress moments, and it could be anything. I think back a few months ago, we had our house painted,
Mhm.
right? So it was a 2, maybe 3 weeks of our house in disarray. We had to move all of our stuff. We had to take TVs from the wall. It created a lot of stress. I was just kind of overwhelmed by going, man, for 2 weeks, we're going to have people in our home. We're going to have things unorderly and just chaos and all of that. But at some point, it was going to end
Mhm.
and everything was going to get back to normal. The walls were going to be painted. So, what I always find relief in is as I'm going through it and as I'm experiencing the anxiety and the stress, to focus myself on, things will be back to normal, and just like putting myself mentally there
Mhm.
to find the relief of when that all ends gives me relief to deal with, this brief period of time where I'm feeling chaos,
Mhm.
and I'm experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety, and I've kind of generalized that to a lot of other areas. Like when I'm getting ready for a presentation or about to do a presentation, my stress peaks and it's at an all-time high, but I know there'll be an end to it. Regardless of the outcome, there'll be an end to it. I will be alive. I will be able to, move past it. It's really just like this moment in time, so putting myself on the other side of stress helps me to deal with the current stress of whatever moment happens. So, I was just curious, and I'm curious to hear back from you that, this next moment of stress that you ever experience, if something like that helps to know that it's going to end and to put yourself on the other side of it.
I'll be sharing that with you at some point. But question, because talking about putting yourself on the other side of it,
Yeah.
I feel like, again, this is me just kind of breaking down just that idea of
Yeah.
being on the other side of it. So part of it is like you kind of have to you have to pass that threshold of
Right.
you're on one side, now you're on
Right.
the other side.
Right.
And then there's the point of actually being on the other
Yeah.
side of it. So like in your examples of kind of reminding yourself that things will come back to
Right.
normal.
Right.
Um, for you, is it more of a process of like you have like that becomes kind of like a mantra or like a self-talk thing, or is it more of like a visualizing
Yeah.
where you're gonna be, a combination? I'm curious, what's your
Yeah, I
process?
would say a little bit of a mantra, but a lot more of the visualization. Like I
Uh-huh.
literally, whether you call it meditation or whether you call it just sitting there and seeing, I mean, the only way I could describe it is the other side of that stressful event,
Mhm.
and like, for instance, if it's a presentation, right? Because the presentation is a brief period of time. I see myself thanking people for coming. I see myself getting off the stage. I see myself, talking to people afterwards. I see myself continuing on with the conference with the relief that that presentation's over.
Uh-huh.
So and I not only visualize but I experience the lower levels of stress, because I know at that point I'll be much more relaxed. I won't be, in the middle of, experiencing the high anxiety, stressful moment of getting onto stage and actually doing the presentation. So that's what I mean by the other side. It's
Uh-huh.
a strong visualization tactic that I use to put myself where I know I'm headed.
Mhm.
You know, I just have to get through this rocky road of, challenges, and I know there'll be another side to it. Focusing on that, where it's a period of lower stress, helps me deal with the higher stress period of all the challenges and stuff.
And I bet it's helpful too that from how you just described it, when you're talking about being on the other side of it, you're talking about like immediately once you're on the other side of it.
Right.
You're not talking about, okay, I'm picturing myself like at home after I've returned from the
Right.
conference, like having a day where I get to chill
Right.
as the other side. You're talking about you're wrapping up the
Right.
presentation and you
Yeah.
have reached like the end. I think that's
Yeah,
valuable.
yeah, typically, and it could be a little bit longer period of time, or it
Mhm.
could be, coming back home from the conference and, not having to worry about preparing for that presentation or delivering the presentation.
Mhm.
So it could be for a little bit of a stretch, but, typically it's a little bit more immediate,
Mhm.
because, that's when you typically experience the crash from the anxiety, and from the stress, where you're kind of like you're peaking and the stress is really high, and then once it's over, it's like whew, it just like glides down
Mhm.
type of thing. So I kind of visualize that whole process, and I visualize the experience that I'm going to have as my stress totally just drops because it's over.
Mhm.
So that's the best example I could give, because it's something that's very salient, and it's just a brief period of time doing a presentation. So
Mhm.
there's like an immediate dip in stress once it's over.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
so
super helpful though,
yeah,
and I like the example too because like that is a really concrete thing.
mhm,
It's I imagine you have to get a little more creative when it's things that are
yeah,
bigger or things that don't have such a finite
right,
ending. So, but I'm gonna think about that as I go
yeah,
through the next few weeks of like being on the
yeah,
other side of it because everything comes to an
right.
end at some point. The good, the bad, everything in between. So at some point, everybody gets to the other side of it.
I might
Um,
need you to remind me if I'm going through a period of stress and I'm not seeing the other side. You'll have to remind me there is the other side.
I
Remember?
I got you.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
well, and I find myself sharing that in different ways with my coachees. Because as we go through different seasons of our business and the company and what we're trying to do, it feels like a lot and it feels overwhelming. And a lot of times, working with somebody who's experiencing stress, and I kind of share that it's typically a season. It's not forever.
Mm,
So, or I also explain it like this is just a chapter in your book of
mhm.
the many chapters, right? So, it's just a little period of time that it's going to come and go, and there'll be the other side of it, and stuff. So, it's definitely the chapter of you moving, was a chapter. There was some stress and anxiety, but now
Mhm.
you're reaping the benefits and you're enjoying your new space, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm on the other side of it.
You're on the other side, man.
Yes,
And look at you
yes.
now. See, that's what it's all about. Today with us we have Eric Davis, and I'm one of our first questions is to ask Eric to introduce himself. So I'm not gonna dive in, but do you want to introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Eric Davis. Thank you so much to Isaac and Brian for having me here. I am a guitar teacher. So I teach a guitar program called Fearless Fretboard, which is really helping long term intermediate guitar players get to the point where they can confidently play the music that they're hearing in their head. And we do that by having a really solid understanding of the way that the guitar works, as well as an understanding of music theory. And I've been very, very happy to have Isaac be able to be a part of the program. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do.
I know we're both super fascinated with your profession and how you teach. Being a recipient of your teaching, I think very highly of it. And but before we dive into some of the nitty gritty, how did you get into the profession?
I've been playing guitar since I was 12 years old. Like most 12-year-olds, I wanted to be like my dad, and my dad is an awesome guitar player. So when I was 12 years old, I asked him how to teach me some songs, and he taught me, Beatles tunes and Chicago tunes and all the classic rock stuff. And very quickly, it went from something that I shared with my dad to something that was just a love of my own. So really, since 12 years old, I've never really looked back. It's just been studying the guitar, writing songs, playing in bands, teaching others. That's what got me into it originally.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it's kind of a good segue. What the podcast is about and what the channel is about mentorship. So one of the things that we dive into is just your story of those that have invested in you, that have mentored you. You already, it sounds like your dad might have been somebody that offered that to you. Do you want to share with us important mentors in your life and who they were, what they did, the impact that it had?
Yeah, I wouldn't be where I am at today without the mentors that I've had. Not that I've accomplished an incredible amount. I mean, I feel like I'm very much a work in progress. I mean, there are so many things that I'm still working on myself. But yes, my dad was an incredible mentor of mine with teaching me guitar at a very young age, but also giving me a wonderful example to look up to, an example of what it means to be consistent and to be loyal and to create a space of love for our family. So another mentor of mine that I can think of was one of my professors at university, Mr. Gary Fukushima. He taught me a lot about how to find my voice as a jazz improvisationalist and how to kind of sit comfortably in the opposing forces of not knowing everything that I would love to be able to know, but still just having to play anyway, just make it up anyway, engage in the process anyway, even though I don't have it all perfectly figured out. And it was very interesting because Gary Fukushima is a piano player, and a lot of times in music spaces, if you're a certain instrumentalist, you learn from the same kind of instrumentalist. So I was very fortunate to kind of connect with Gary, even though we played completely different instruments. We shared that language of music, which taught me a lot about mentorship. Those are like the first two that come to mind. I could easily continue rattling off other mentors as well, but those are the first two that come to mind.
You said something that is the whole point of and the inspiration of the channel and of the work that we do in mentorship. You said you wouldn't be where you're at without these individuals. I always think it's so powerful to have people that come in our lives, whether they're family or whether they're just other people we meet along the way, that they change the trajectory of our lives. And, we end up saying we wouldn't be where we're at without these people. Like, to me, there isn't too many other things more powerful than somebody that makes an impact into somebody's life so profoundly that somebody is different because of the investment that somebody made. So I think it's cool that you put it that way, and I think we all experience that. So that's one of the inspirations for this whole thing.
One thing that Isaac and I were kind of talking about in preparing to speak with you today, um, is I think as musicians, we all have mentors through music that like don't fully meet the criteria of what we normally expect from mentors. What I mean with that is like it's awesome that you had your father as like a mentor, of course, in life, but sounds like musically as well. You had uh, Gary Fukushima
Mhm.
as your mentor musically, and also, of course, being a professor, there's a clear teacher-student thing. But what Isaac and I were talking about the other day is how, as musicians, the mentorship that we might receive like remotely from other musicians. So I wanted to kind of get your take on what you see maybe as like some differences between, let's say, mentorship you got from Gary Fukushima and then maybe mentorship that you got from just like being a student of music and like finding music that spoke to you or that taught you, or if there are artists where you just followed their career and listened to their interviews and all of that. So, what's your take on kind of the difference there between those mentors you interact with in real life versus the ones as a musician that you just might be listening to and that's it?
That's a really interesting question. So, Gary Fukushima was definitely somebody that I had a mentor, in real life, in vivo, could have conversations with. But you bring up an interesting point about listening to records and the artists that we love, and someone like Bill Evans, who's not around anymore. I'd never be able to meet someone like that. I would say that one of my biggest inspirations is this guy, Ted Green. And Ted Green passed away, before I really started to get into jazz guitar. But his recordings, as well as some of his teachings, have been made available on YouTube. So I can learn from listening to his records, and I can learn from watching the YouTube videos, but I'm not going to be able to sit down and have a conversation with him, which I think is kind of what you were getting at. And the differences between those two relationships are pretty significant. On the one hand, with someone like Ted Green, he has this expertise on the guitar that I don't know anyone else. I know a lot of really amazing guitar players, but I don't know anyone personally. And one could argue that there is no one alive currently who plays as well as Ted did. So the value of being able to reach outside of my circle of acquaintances for inspiration and for mentorship, I mean, that is absolutely incredibly valuable that we now have the access to in our modern age because of recording equipment and YouTube and all of this. But even, I guess, historically, back in the day, you would either read about others or you would hear stories of who others were. So this whole idea of being mentored by someone that we may not meet personally has probably been around for a bit in terms of the human experience. But comparing and contrasting those two, I mean, Gary Fukushima is able to offer me something that Ted will never be able to do, which is that Gary knows me personally, and he can actually give me advice into my life within the context of where I'm at. I've had the fortunate experience of being here in Los Angeles and being able to meet, some of my musical heroes. And if I have a conversation with them, for 5 minutes or something in front of a show or at the coffee shop, and then I ask them a question, they might be able to give me advice, but they don't really know who I am. They don't have that context. So I would say the benefit of having the in-person mentorship is that they really know me, they really understand the situation. But then the benefit of being able to be inspired by other people that I'll never be able to meet, it's that you get to see a glimpse into a life of someone who is just a virtuoso at their craft, where someone like that, they're not around anymore. So he's not able to have a conversation with me even if he wanted to.
Eric, where could people find you? We'd love to promote all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Eric Davis Music, and then you can also find me on YouTube, also at Eric Davis Music.
And how can they find your Fearless Fretboard curriculum program if they want to join?
So a lot of it is on Instagram and YouTube, and there's like DMing me on Instagram is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
I also do have a website, but most of the students that I hear from, it's really Instagram and YouTube.
I know we didn't talk about it last episode, but on our first episode, we were talking about New Year's resolutions.
Yes.
And then on the playback for last episode, I realized we didn't talk about that, which I think actually kind of works because it gave us a little time to marinate, kind of figure out where we're going on our resolutions journey.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you how your progress has been on your New Year's resolution. Your resolution was essentially to have more quality time as a family, correct?
Yeah. And specifically, I think the way I broke it down, I wanted to try to have at least one meal together with all of us, my kids and stuff, because we're all busy. My kids are college age. So, they're out in school, they're working, they got their social life and all that stuff. So, I felt like that would be a realistic goal, is to be able to have at least one meal together per week. It's a work in progress. It's still something that, it requires effort to try to get all of us together because we're all very busy. And everybody's schedule is different, but it's still a very important goal. When I think of my kids, they're two young adults. My son's in his 20s, early 20s. My daughter's in her late teens. They're also going through their season of life, being at that age. So, it's a bit of a challenge, and there's a bit of resistance, but I'm trying to instill that as a value of like, let's at least try to have one meal together. And it allows us to catch up. It allows us to, check in to see how everybody's doing. And it just kind of gives us the routine of one meal together. So it's a work in progress. We haven't been exact because of everybody's busy schedule, but it's still very much something super important to me.
It's also difficult when you have a goal that inherently requires other people too. So it makes sense that it would take a bit of time to kind of figure out how what adjustments you need to make and what everybody else is willing to do. And I'm sure it's important to you all, even if your kids are in their season of life where it might not feel as closely important, but like ultimately I'm sure it's felt all around. So
yeah, I hope so. I hope that they're getting something out of it now, but at the very least that it's a seed that's being planted, so that way as they continue to grow, they look back and that value grows in them, where it becomes important to them too, and that they look back and say, hey dad, hey mom, how about a meal together, where it becomes something that becomes important to them. So it's something that is important in the moment, but it's also a seed that I'm trying to plant for it to become hopefully a value of theirs, to have family time and all of that. So
totally.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
How's your New Year's resolution? I think it was exercising.
Yeah, and at the time, I didn't have anything really pinpointed. I just knew I wanted to make some changes, and I was hopeful that living in a house, moving to our new place would facilitate some of those changes. So it's been going well. There's a few different reasons why I've wanted to be more intentionally healthy in terms of my physical health. And I've been seeing results. So first, I started running again.
Okay.
I've always been one of those freaks who really enjoys cardio. Don't know why.
Okay.
Like
Awesome.
lifting is fine.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I also am getting, I didn't think 29 was that age, but I'm getting to the age where I'm starting to pull things randomly when I feel like I shouldn't be pulling things, like my back. I had this weird thing where I think I pulled or tore something in my chest that I still need to get checked out. Running is something that I always enjoyed, even when in the moments when I hate it. So
just wait till you get to your mid 40s and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm pulling something just sitting here. So, it's bad stuff.
Wonderful.
So enjoy this gradual progress.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks. I will. So what I'm doing now is I'm going on runs. Now I live in a really nice neighborhood, so it's just so much more motivating to get out and go on a run where I'm really enjoying my surroundings. So I live on a street that's I guess it's perpendicular to two other major streets, and I live at one end. So from one end to the other is almost exactly a mile.
Okay.
So I started running, and I had the idea of like, maybe I'll run like 2 or 3 times a week, trying to find a pinpoint for my goal. I've been doing definitely more so of running twice a week than 3 times a week. But what I've wanted to pinpoint more is the distance that I'm running. The first time I ran, like after the 3rd block, I was like winded. And I couldn't make it all the way to the end, to that other main street. And then I was able to run. And then I was able to cross a mile. So my pinpointed goal is I want to run 3 times a week, and I want to be able to consistently do a 2-mile run.
Okay.
I broke my record last week, and I got a 1.74 mile run in.
Okay.
And it's nice because all I need to do is run up and down that long street, and I should be close enough to 2 miles where I just need to, turn around, run down a block one more time, and I should reach it.
Yeah.
So far, that's going well. I'm also doing 50 push-ups a day.
Okay.
I'm not too strict on myself. So as long as I get the push-ups in, I could break it up or do
Right.
whatever. Lastly, on days where I'm not running,
Yeah.
I have the goal of doing 50 sit-ups a day.
Okay.
So all of those things coming together is definitely helping me live a more healthy
Yeah.
lifestyle. And then on top of that, moving into the house, it's really forced my wife and I to be tightening our belts as far as what we're spending, which means less eating out,
Hmm.
more eating at home, which is sometimes it results in healthy food.
Yeah.
Sometimes it results, I guess, in less unhealthy food,
Uh-huh.
depending on what's being made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I'm definitely making progress towards the general New Year's resolution, but I'm happy that I'm like naturally like settling into different pinpoints.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
keep it going, man.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's always it's a good habit to get into, and you're going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
Later on in
Definitely.
life. So
Yeah. That's the goal for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. And enjoying the like lifestyle change that it brings too. I'm like, oh my God, I do feel better when I'm running. Like,
Indeed.
wow, I can fall asleep more easily. How crazy is that? So
Right. All the benefits.
yeah, totally.
Indeed.
So we'll keep
Yeah.
each other and all of our listeners updated on our New Year's resolutions. But I think this is the first time I've ever like felt accountable or being held accountable for the resolution. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you for that.
we'll do a little check next time.
Yeah,
See how things are going.
perfect,
Right?
perfect. Let's do it.
Awesome.
So we talked about this a little bit,
Yeah.
but I want to take this time to introduce a new segment. Obviously, we have been cultivating a mentor-mentee relationship
Mhm.
for maybe close to like half a year at this point.
Yeah.
The seeds going back before then. But just like how I came onto the podcast
Yeah.
talking about the move last
Mhm.
time, I realized like, oh, of course I still have more things I want to discuss with
Yeah.
Isaac. So my new proposed segment is the mentee moment.
Okay.
I-
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun, or like
Yes.
maybe some like Benny Hill music, running
Right.
around. As a mentee, I feel like I have moments. I mean, I know we all do, but where it's something that to me might feel like it's a problem that's like way up here, or
Right.
it feels that way.
I would actually be so curious if in the comments
Uh,
people wrote if they understood your Benny Hill example, metaphor. I'd
Yeah.
be so curious.
That-
I understood it, but I'm curious if the audience understands it.
Oh.
That was a cool reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that stuff. Also, cool thing if anybody listening, if they feel like they are having mentee moments themselves, I think they should share that too. That would be fun because
Sweet.
we all have them moments or seasons in life, like you've been saying, where we really do need somebody or feel the need to
Yeah.
share with somebody. But in this case, I'm having a mentee moment.
Okay.
Cue
Right.
the music. So my mentee moment is I am experiencing some form of imposter syndrome right now. And I don't think we've ever really fully talked about imposter syndrome, but I know it's such a common thing.
Yeah.
I would imagine in all professions, careers, maybe walks of life. But we get to talk about it more in like how it relates to ABA and the work that we do.
Right.
I've been experiencing a bit of imposter syndrome because of changes in my caseload,
Yeah.
kind of a change in my role. And it's resulted in, I think, me comparing myself to my colleagues and peers a little bit more, and kind of feeling that I'm not doing as much all the time as my colleagues. And also I'm not at our clinic as much, and I'm
Yeah.
feeling a little bit more out of the loop, which
Sure.
makes me feel a little bit more like a passive agent than an active
Gotcha.
agent at work. So that's kind of the backdrop, and I want to, get into detail about that. But maybe just for everybody listening, I'd love to just hear in general, like, what's your take on imposter syndrome in a very broad sense? Like, how would you even define imposter syndrome or
Right.
explain how it happens or who it happens to?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a concept that's talked about quite a bit. I think it's a concept that a lot of us experience. I know I certainly do still in a lot of different areas, but I mean, imposter syndrome essentially is when you're in a situation and you're having experiences of not feeling good enough to be there, where you almost feel like the imposter of like, if people only knew that I don't qualify to do this or I shouldn't be doing this, then what would people think? So you get a lot of self-doubt about your ability to do something. Therefore, you kind of feel like an imposter, in that moment. I mean, in my own words, that's the way I'm describing it.
Sure.
It's probably written a little bit differently if you look for the exact definition of it.
That's okay. I
But
wanted your definition.
yeah, so it's a common feeling that we get as we are growing in our careers, whether it's personal or whether it's professional. So it sounds like you're going through a season of, there's some changes, and you're maybe feeling, a little self-doubt in, your new position compared to what you were doing before, or maybe compared to your colleagues. Is that kind of what you're experiencing?
Yeah. I'm very fortunate to be working in a high school district now, or with a high school district. And I've really, really been enjoying it. But I think just very plainly, a lot of the normal consistent flow of like work that I was experiencing doing more in-home work, it's just not there at the schools. It's a lot more site support is required. It not as intensive for like managing or making changes to the programs for these students themselves.
So kind of the administration piece of running cases, similar to home-based programs funded by insurance or, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That part is lacking. And it's funny too, because with that, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from the school,
Good.
but I'm which is good. But there, I look around and I'm like, sometimes I feel like, thanks, but like, I'm not doing much, which I don't think is
right.
I'm aware that it's imposter syndrome. At least I'm happy for that. But those thoughts definitely creep in. It's like, what? Thank me for what? Like, I'm just here, doing my part. So,
Right. Well, it sounds like from a social validity standpoint, they're communicating to you that you're making an impact. Whether you experience it or not, they're experiencing the impact by them thanking you for whatever you're doing. So that's a good source of feedback. It's better than them saying like, yeah, please don't come back type of thing. So I totally get the feelings of imposter syndrome when you take a look at the work that colleagues might have or that you used to have compared to what you have now, but it just sounds like it's just a different position and your assignments is different. I would say your position comes with a big responsibility of nurturing and growing that relationship, so that maybe it doesn't come with the administrative responsibilities that where you kind of see like maybe you're experiencing the difference between you and your colleagues, but it comes with the really big responsibility of maintaining and helping grow that relationship. So, it comes with a heightened sense of responsibility that, we lean on you for to help them continue to trust our services through the work that you're doing.
What it makes me think of too, I had this discussion with my wife a few months ago, where we felt like, because I mean, we've been together for a number of years. We've only been married for 11 months. And definitely you can feel a difference between being together and living together versus actually being married. And we're still figuring out like who has what responsibilities. My wife told me we should start leaning into our own skills more and our own strengths more. And like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And it was like this revelation for like, oh yeah, I don't need to bend over backwards at home to do stuff that like I'm not as good at and is going to feel like it takes so much more effort.
Right.
We can divide and conquer also just based off of what we're good at, not necessarily just what we think is like fair in terms of the division of labor in home. So going to work, I know one of my strongest assets as just a working person,
Mhm.
and of course as a BCBA and an ABA practitioner, um, is my soft skills
Mhm.
and is my ability to develop and nurture relationships and kind of build that social capital with people I'm working
Yeah.
with, like at the school, knowing that it is going to be very valuable and there are going to be moments when I lean on that.
Right.
And kind of like you said, it's a different
Right.
responsibility. Maybe that's why I'm feeling a bit of that
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. Maybe because I'm leaning into a strength of mine and
Mhm.
it doesn't feel as effortful, I guess, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
Mhm.
Sounds like you're better positioned to capitalize on your strengths, which don't feel as taxing to you
Mhm.
because they're your natural gifts and strengths,
Mhm.
so you're kind of more in your flow,
S
I think, which I think is great. I think it's, when we're appropriately positioned,
Mhm.
that's all we could really ask for, because, then we're able to lean on the skill set that we're most comfortable with.
Mhm.
What the only thing I would caution is you want to keep on working on the things that are not your strengths to
Right.
expand your range and your repertoire. Because
Mhm.
for lack of a better word, you don't want to be a one trick pony.
Yeah.
Where that's all you're able to do, and because naturally you'll be put in the other role at some point.
Mhm.
Because that's just part of being a BCBA is managing different types of funding sources.
Mhm.
So that's the one thing I would just caution, is to make sure that you're still working on elevating your lesser strengths,
Mhm.
to also get those up, and then just increase the range, because you're going to be more valuable,
Mhm.
that way, when you have a wider range of the work that you could do.
I appreciate that, because it's funny talking it out now, I feel like it's all flowing very,
Hmm.
very easily, that I definitely feel like I finally have reached a point in my career where it's no longer uh a constant workflow of expanding myself horizontally,
Hmm.
and building all of these different things at once. Because I imagine for most careers,
Right.
there is that bit of paying one's dues where you're learning a lot of things, you're constantly out of your comfort zone. So I feel like only now am am I really stepping into a position that is stepping into a very clear strength.
Yeah.
But it's a nice reminder to be like, okay, well, just because you're here now
Right.
doesn't mean you always will be. And just because you've reached that point, that doesn't mean that you stop broadening your skills
Yeah.
to other
And
things.
one recommendation I would give is to use this time where your current position feels a little bit easier because it's tapping into your strengths,
Mm,
and use this as an opportunity to go to your coaches and say, please help me, give me feedback. What do I need to keep working on? Because, you know, it sounds like you might have the bandwidth to work on those areas that, are less of strengths,
mhm.
um, less strengths. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
So that way you could, pick those up while your bigger position is more in your comfort zone, because you don't want to stay all in your comfort zone. Because I always argue that comfort zone kills.
Hmm.
You want to also push yourself to the things that you're less comfortable with, to elevate those, so that way you're broadening your range of skills,
Hmm.
and you could essentially be proficient in all the things that you're going to be asked to do in your career.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's going to make you more of an asset and more valuable, to anybody that you're with.
Hmm.
So
I really like that advice. And I definitely do have more of the
mhm.
bandwidth for that, and even though I am in a zone that is more comfortable for me, uh, just a nice reminder of, like, don't stay just in that zone
Right,
for too long, and
right.
dip your toes in the water a little bit and be
Hmm.
open to the feedback
Yeah,
and improving in other ways.
yeah,
So I
exactly.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that. Thanks for
yeah.
helping me through my mentee moment.
Yeah, no,
My
for sure. And it's something I could relate the feelings of imposter syndrome, because throughout my career, and I've been doing this 27 years, um, those feelings are are there pretty frequently, and especially as you reach new milestones. Like I experienced that when I was a much newer supervisor, and I was asked to go to IEP meetings to be the expert in the behavior program. So I was kind of new to the field. I was, growing rapidly, probably growing quicker than what my skill set was growing at the time. And I felt like an imposter being at IEPs surrounded by other professionals and having to be the expert in, behavior analysis or the behavior programs, and I had to figure out a way to get through it. Luckily I did. And, I was able to learn from it, but the feelings of imposter syndrome were very pronounced. We talked about consulting to parents as something that brings up the imposter syndrome, or at least at the time it did, especially when I didn't have kids and I was much younger than the parents that I was trying to consult to.
Yep.
In my head, I was dealing with feelings of, should I be the one doing this? It's like, what do I know? I'm not a parent, and I'm trying to give them, like, do this and you will be able to get these results, so I had to deal with feelings of imposter syndrome then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I feel like parent training, parent consultation, that is the place for imposter syndrome. Here at BDA, it's like your first stop on your supervision journey. And I would imagine many other agencies are set up the same way. It makes sense. As our field gets younger and younger and younger, it's something that is only going to be more prevalent of, okay, we have parent consultants or people doing the parent training who are 20 years old or close enough to that. And it can be scary. And I mean, talk about imposter syndrome. And I say this with all of the love and respect in my heart to the parents. Shout out to the parents who do this and who are great advocates for their kids. The ones who, like, you start talking, you're trying to establish expectations. It's like, do you have any questions? Like, or like, it's your turn. Like, what are your expectations? And those parents, God bless them, first thing, do you have kids? No. But I still have some valuable information. Please listen for a little bit. And most of the time it works out just fine.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it is an awkward dynamic. And I remember, as I grew and mature in the field and kind of reached personal milestones to the point where, one of the milestones was when I had kids. I had a completely different perspective of and how I delivered parent consultation, because it's a hard gig to be a parent, so I just had that perspective of like, oh, now I know what it feels like. So my consultation was different, and then as I reached the milestone of, I was starting to be older than the parents than I was consulting to. It was kind of a different perspective. So I was a parent of older kids who was not consulting to, parents that were typically younger than I was. You typically get some, just credibility just for being older. So it just kind of like it swings the other way, where you kind of have different perspectives from there. But yeah, definitely the onset was a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah, definitely. I've noticed because a lot of my colleagues are a few years older than me. And I mean, you know how it is over the past, 2 years, like everybody in our company is having kids, which is great.
Yeah.
But I've totally noticed the difference where there are times where I'm with a colleague who previously was a supervisor, and in times where I would expect that person to be a little bit more like firm and like a little bit more hardline with ABA stuff, all of a sudden they've like totally softened on certain things because they have children of their own. And it's like nice to see, and reassuring to see that people are changing their styles because of their experience.
It is. It's challenging, but blessed work being a parent, so, you kind of have that perspective of, it's hard. And as a behavior analyst, I wish I could tell you that I'm an amazing behavior analytic parent to my kids, but it's, there's the, it's always there, but sometimes we are under the contingencies of the context we're in with our kids, and ABA just goes out
Yeah.
the window.
I have flat out heard that ABA constantly flies out the window when we're just like living with our own children, and I find it hilarious and also just like super humanizing too.
Yeah. One of these days I'll have to share the story of when I'm sitting there in high levels of frustration, talking and lecturing the kids, and I have to like resort to, don't you know who I am? I'm a behavior analyst. You should be listening to me. And then they just look at me laughing. They're like, Dad, yeah, no.
I've been doing this for decades since before you were born.
Right, exactly.
Then
But
they put you
nobody's
on
buying
extinction.
it. Nobody's buying it. They don't care. Yeah, the other place where imposter syndrome comes up quite a bit currently that I still experience is speaking at conferences, especially as I've had the honor to be asked to be a keynote speaker a couple times. And every time I've been asked, which not every time, it's not like happens all the time, but the couple times I've been asked, that's when I feel like, oh my gosh, like me, like what can I share to all of you? So it just becomes a very humbling and very imposter-y type of feeling. And it's one of those things like how we started talking about, that's where I have to use the strategy of, on the other side of this, I'm going to experience relief, because right now it feels like this growing amount of stress leading up to the presentation. So that's where I still experience it quite a bit.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that makes perfect sense. I definitely also experience it, as a younger BCBA and a newer BCBA. We're fortunate to have a lot of really experienced interventionists and therapists here. And when I am working with them, I don't feel. I used to feel a lot more imposter syndrome, but one thing that's really helped me to get through that, is I'm really transparent with those who have been in the field longer than I have, where they are receiving my supervision, that I really tell them just like how much I value them and how much I really need their help.
Right.
They've seen more clients, they've worked with more families, they have seen a larger spectrum of behaviors and interventions. So that's how I try to, I think that's how I wind up getting ahead of imposter syndrome a lot of the times in those situations. But even then, sometimes when I get suggestions for different interventions to implement in a program, most of the time I'm really accepting of it. I'm really happy. And then there are other times where I'm like, oh, I should have known that. I should have done that from the start, and this and that. But typically I try to, just keeping the learner and the family's best interests at heart. I know I'm not doing that if I have a superiority complex with those who are on my team. So and it's turned into a really good experience, whereas in the past it scared me to death. And it almost made me feel like uncomfortably on high alert. To now, I feel really comfortable with some of the more seasoned interventionists who I've worked with on a few cases to just tell them, like, I don't know. I don't know. If you have any ideas, please share them with me, and I can, mull them over and see if those are viable options. But again, maybe there's this amount or this level of imposter syndrome in other fields. I'm sure there is, but there's quite a bit in our field because of the way that our intervention is structured.
Right.
Yeah.
I hear it a lot for sure. So I think you're going through a very common thing, and you just mentioned a really good strategy to overcome, some of the feelings, to partner up with those seasoned interventionist and get their support. It's okay to say I don't know, and and I think it's just something that we go through, that we all have been able to come through it, as you will, and you'll experience it again, but you'll overcome it. So it's kind of one of those things that we experience in our field.
Totally. It never ends.
Right, exactly.
It never ends. But there is another side of it. we'll get through to the other side of it.
That's right.
There we go.
And that's a good summary to wrap up today.
Yeah, right.
It never ends, and there's the other side
Yeah.
of it. So
Totally.
cool. Well, should we conclude on that note?
Yeah, I think we should. Let's
right.
wrap it up. I feel like we're really hitting our groove here. We're hitting our
Yeah.
stride in terms of the flow of these episodes and everything. I'm excited to keep going.
Let's just keep going and like give Ryan a never-ending podcast to have to edit through.
Yes.
And just keep rambling.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout outs to Ryan for just constantly handling all the different things we throw at him. Thank you, Ryan.
Exactly.
We appreciate
Yay,
you.
Ryan.
All right.
See you next time.
Yes.
All right.
Hasta la vista.
Bye-bye. We have a mentorologist webinar coming up with Gabriella Nelson, also known as Behavior Chick on social media. She's going to be doing a webinar on sleeping, which I encourage everybody to attend. It's going to be a great webinar on a very cool and unique topic with a very influential speaker. So join us on May 22nd from 4:30 to 6 Pacific Standard Time for a webinar on sleeping by Gabriella Nelson, BCBA.